Hello, North Country. Welcome back to Waite, Innovate. We are here with episode 47 of North Volume Media's latest and greatest podcast. My name is Matthew Waite. I'll be your host for the next hour or so. For our new listeners, welcome. The mission here at Waite Innovate is to highlight and amplify North Country voices of citizens, activists, innovators working to move our region forward. Today we have one of those very individuals, Scott Allen. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
So for our listeners who may not be familiar, Scott Allen is the managing partner and director of AES Northeast, so also known for engineering, land surveying, architecture, conveniently located in downtown Plattsburgh at 1012 City Hall Place, also a branch office in Cliff Haven. So doing a lot of innovation through architecture, changing the landscape literally of the North Country through building things. So I'm very excited and honored to have Scott on the program today. So as usual, we start out with a little bit of background. So Scott, where are you from?
Matt, I'm a Saranac boy.
Okay.
Born and raised, yeah.
I won't hold that against you. My Peru roots.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, I did a quick trip out to Texas for a short while. Texas, not my kind of town. And then I did a stint in Utica, New York, for the Department of Transportation for a few years. And then came back to the North Country and have been here for the last many decades. I guess.
I was going to say, it looks like 30 years in the work that you're currently doing. Started out with a different name, and then about 20 years ago, transitioned to AES Northeast. But let's talk a little bit about young Scott Allen. I mean, at Saranac in high school, what were you up to? You're playing sports? Did you have interest in math and science, things that, typical people who end up in engineering or land surveying start with?
I guess my early years at Saranac, I was always interested in math, liked math classes, did a lot of reading, I think, and so forth, and was involved with some sports until my first year of high school, and then took on that kind of a rebellious state that many high school aged people do.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the mid '70s. That was a unique time.
We had Matthew Craig, who said he had a similar experience of kind of rebelling against the in the sports realm, and I think my brother did a little bit of that. So I did as well, right?
Yeah, I unfortunate, but I got out of sports. I couldn't.
Was it injury or just had other interests?
Probably because I felt that I was, too cool to listen to coaches and things like that. So got out of sports. Like I said, the '70s were an interesting time back then. But by the time I got around to my senior year, I got my head straight back again and, sat down in the guidance counselor's office one day and said, what am I going to do with my future? And started going through brochures and so forth, and came across land surveying, and that really appealed to me because it offered a combination of mathematics as well as working outdoors. So.
Yeah, so in high school, were you an outdoorsman? Were you hiking, cross-country skiing, downhill, a lot of the stuff that us youth here in the North Country take part in?
Yeah, well, my background, actually, I was a fifth-generation farmer from Burt Hill, actually.
Oh, cool.
Well, actually, I was, I guess my father was the last generation to actually work on the farm. And then when he married my mother, she came up as a school teacher to Saranac from the Saugerties, New York area. And when they got married, my father got a job as a truck driver. So they were, the last ones to actually run the farm. My grandfather ran the farm, and we lived with. He lived with us. We lived on the farm that's where I grew up. So so living on a farm, really got to spend a lot of time in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and that kind of thing. So
yeah, not an atypical upbringing in the North Country. I think I've got some farm roots in the family. The Weirs in Morrisonville, Scholar Falls. So. Saranac's got a lot of farm country out there as well.
There was, it was mostly self-sufficient farmers for many generations out there. But then, post World War II, farming went on the decline, and there's still one or two farms left up there, but not very many.
Yeah, it's definitely changed and consolidated, and you're seeing these kind of
Right.
agro farms and consolidations. But
Yeah.
let's talk about the transition then away from the farming roots and toward forestry and surveying. So still tied to the land to a certain extent, but.
Yeah.
What was it about? I think Paul Smith's, right? Was it something unique about Paul Smith's when you were graduating high school that you said, there's something here as far as land surveying? They had a good program. What sold you?
Yeah, well, Paul Smith's was one of the few colleges to offer surveying and also the forestry. I was aware of forestry. Paul Smith's, as you know, was not far outside of Saranac Lake, so I was aware of Paul Smith's and some of the forest rangers and game wardens from the area had graduated from there. So it felt right to me. And it was not that far away from home. Wasn't a big jump. So,
Yeah, no, exactly. Both, as far as the very rural aspect and, just beautiful land. I mean, going to Paul Smith's and Mount Van Hovenberg's there. There's beautiful cross-country downhill skiing. So did that help sell you, or was it mostly the degree? I noticed Paul Smith's, in my research, is actually the only four-year private college located in the Adirondack Mountains. Was that part of the selling point?
Yeah. Well, back at that time, it was actually a 2-year school.
Really?
Yeah. And it was actually, was all male college, just I think 2 years before I enrolled there. I think women were allowed to attend only 2 short years before I attended.
So I imagine what happened is you got in and all the ladies were like, we've got to get into this school. So they just protested and broke down the doors and helped. But eventually that must have been good timing though, right? If it went from kind of a predominantly male school, was that something that you and a lot of the campus accepted, or was there a little bit of hesitancy?
It didn't bother me at all at the time. I thought it was cool. It was a good experience too, because a lot of the students when I attended, and probably still are, came from more urban areas, New York City area, Long Island, Connecticut, a lot of New Jersey students.
No kidding.
Attended as well. It was great. Had a great time at Paul Smith's.
And then, so let's talk about the transition. How long after getting your degree, and what kind of a degree was it? Was it a land surveying degree?
At that time, surveying was offered as an option to the forestry program. Currently, Paul Smith's does have a surveying technology program, but at the time, surveying was more in its infancy at Paul Smith's, and it was offered as an option. It was great to be involved with the forestry program too.
So one of the things I'm interested in, having visited Paul Smith's, again, very rural for anyone of our listeners who aren't familiar, it's really kind of tucked away in the woods down there, just outside Saranac Lake, as you said. So how much of the learning is actually inside the classroom versus actually getting out and exploring in the beautiful Adirondack Mountains?
Yeah, that was another unique thing about Paul Smith's is much of the classroom time was spent outdoors. Probably one of the few colleges where you were required to come to your first day of class with steel toe boots, a hard hat, and an axe as well.
That's neat, really.
You had
An
to buy
axe.
those things. Yeah, you had to buy an axe.
Boy, as a lawyer, I'm just
thinking.
thinking about the attorneys working for the school. What questioning? Really, are we bringing an axe day one? But that's kind of neat.
Yeah, an interesting story about Paul Smith's. You may be familiar with the logo for Paul Smith's. It's a leaning pine. That leaning pine used to stand in the quad of the campus. And I think it was just the year before I attended, or maybe 2 years before, a disgruntled student chopped that tree down.
Yikes. That's not cool.
Yeah, no, it was considered, I think, a historical landmark. It
Right.
had been on the National Register or State Register of Historic Places. And what was funny about that story is the next day, the instructors, professors, and so forth went around to the dorm rooms and checked everybody's axe because this tree had been reinforced with concrete.
Ah, okay.
So they found the axe that had been chewed up badly from chopping into the concrete the night before, and the owner of that axe was actually, found guilty of cutting down that tree.
Wow, that's a pretty neat forensic investigation that they were able to do. That's really neat.
They tied that with some threats that he had made previously after getting some failing grades from. They put two and two together and got him to confess.
Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah. I think another time we saw that was with college football or something. There was like an Auburn rivalry where someone poisoned. I think Alabama versus Auburn. They poisoned a tree. That's just kind of really sad when you see people stoop to those levels of property destruction, even nature destruction, just to make a point. But.
Right.
But anyway, let's get into a little bit more happy time and place. So after transitioning, was it easy to find a job in the field, or did it take you time to kind of settle?
Oh, absolutely easy. Anybody graduating from Paul Smith's at the time with a surveying degree, and even for the forestry students too, I think placement was like higher than 95%. It was up around 98, 99% placement. Nice. And for those two programs, it probably still is that high. So I went to work directly. I was hired in the fall semester before spring graduation, actually, and then went to work locally again for a local engineer and land surveyor, Robert Sutherland, RMS, whose office is still in Plattsburgh. Bob passed away last year, in fact. Actually did 4 years of my required internship for Bob Sutherland. And then,
4 years of required internship. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, let's see. To talk a little bit about the land surveying license.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
At the time, it was a 6-year ladder, a combination of a 2-year degree in surveying, or at least the surveying option program that Paul Smith has gotten accreditation for from the State Board for Engineering and Land Surveying. It was either a 2-year associate's degree and 4 years of experience doing land surveying under a licensed land surveyor, or a 4-year degree and 2 years of work experience.
Okay, 2 to 4 or 4 to 2.
Yeah, and currently it's an 8-year ladder.
Wow.
The 2-year associate's degree in land surveying with 6 years of experience that actually has to be approved by the State Board for Engineering and Land Surveying.
Wow.
And then at that point, then you can sit for the 16-hour licensing exam.
Is that it? So similar to the New York State Bar exam.
Yeah, I don't.
As far as timing.
But
so I was just thinking. It seems like a pretty interesting and lucrative and a good career path for a lot of young North Country people who want to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. But it doesn't come without its cost, right? It seems like you have to be pretty serious about doing it because it's a pretty intensive program.
Yeah. It's it took a lot of time, a lot of studying beyond the formal education. It was a lot of self-training. And the experience has to be approved, as I said. So you can't just, go to work for a land surveyor and work on the books or just work on maps. You have to have, acceptable experience to a board of surveyors and engineers before you can sit for the exam.
Yeah, no, it sounds like, again, fairly comparable to law. As far as timing, now an 8-year path, that's about where we're at with law. 4-year undergrad and 3-year law school. It's actually longer for land surveying, so that's somewhat counterintuitive. But
and there's a movement now too to make a 4-year bachelor's degree in surveying a requirement in addition to the 4 years internship. To take the exam,
so get in now, kids, before it gets even tougher.
Yeah. I just made the 6-year ladder. It was right after I got my license that the 8-year ladder went into regulation.
Great. So you started with RMS, had a pretty good experience, it sounds like, and then eventually, a few years later, about 1988, you started your own firm.
I did. Yeah, I went out to Department of Transportation, Region 2 headquarters in Utica for a while. I don't know if anybody listening is from Utica.
Utica, shout out. How we doing, Utica?
Shout out to Utica. That was an interesting town. That was quite a city back in back during that time frame.
It's still got a lot of culture, interestingly enough. There's an art museum there. I mean, I don't attend Utica too often, other than, well, I think we might get into this. There's a craft brew, Saranac, a larger craft brew organization
Utica
there.
Club,
So.
originally Utica Club. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, where I lived was not far from the Utica Club factory, but I remember back in those days there were some nightclubs located not too far from downtown Utica. And I worked in the state office building in Utica, but it was a fairly wild town under the influence of the Teamsters Union too.
Okay.
Maybe Jimmy Hoffa paid a visit or two to Utica, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure historically in some of those towns that there's a lot of those union types of connections. So.
Yeah.
So what brought you back to the North Country
so
then?
I was working at Department of Transportation, and then my father actually got a hold of me and said, there's an ad here in the local newspaper, the Press Republican. LaBerge Engineering, an Albany engineering firm, had a branch office in Plattsburgh, just north of Cumberland headquarters on Route 9. And that branch office was looking for a land surveyor. So I responded to that ad. My daughter was born actually when we lived in Utica. So my wife and daughter and I were, all interested in getting back to our roots here, and saw this as a good opportunity. So went to work as a land surveyor for LaBerge Engineering in the branch office, and did that for a couple of years, and then ran into my original partner, Wayne Ryan. He was a professional engineer. He was the superintendent of buildings and grounds at CVPH at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I was working on a survey, which was actually for the Fitzpatrick Cancer Center. It was before that was built. We surveyed the property prior to the design of that building, and got to know Wayne. And Wayne was interested in starting an engineering firm, and I was interested in not being under the thumb of Albany headquarters at
Right.
the time. So we got together and went for it. And,
Getting back to the high school, not like to be a little bit more autonomous maybe than.
Yeah.
So okay, great. So why Waite Innovate? And you just decided to start your own thing.
Did. Yeah. As I said, my daughter was maybe 3-4 years old at the time. And Wayne, his children were around that age too, and it was a big step, to cut ties with, the corporate world, if you will, at the time, and just strike out on our own and start up an engineering and land surveying company in the area with no clients, whatsoever. But
Just had to start from scratch and built your own base. And you referenced striking out, but you didn't get 3 strikes, right? I mean, you ended up, I believe, being fairly successful to the point where you actually expanded and kind of rebranded about 10 years later in 1999, I think. And now we have our current iteration, AES Northeast.
That's right. Yeah. We started out as just a 2-man shop, hired 1 or 2 people. That was on Clinton Street. We were at 19 Clinton Street, and that office would only fit about 4 people. And I think when we filled that up with 4 people, we decided to move into to a larger space. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We probably moved 4 or 5 times before we finally landed on City Hall Place, where we've been since around '98.
Cool.
99.
Yeah, highly visible. I mean, that's one of the most trafficked intersections, I think, probably in Plattsburgh, close to Bridge Street.
Great
there.
place.
So you've obviously had some success there. So you feel like the roots are there, and I think you've even mentioned, even in the last 3 years, you've almost doubled size. So
We've experienced tremendous growth in the last 3-4 years or so, and even within the past year and a half, I think we've probably hired around 10 more people, most of them engineers. We've I got to tell you, Matt, it's a bit of a challenge to find engineers to come work in this area. So.
Well, I can provide some specific insight into that as being someone who started out my undergraduate education in engineering. So,
Oh, is that right?
Was that you? Sorry.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm on stun.
We're live here on video, folks. But yeah, no, I mean, I went to University of Buffalo, started out in the engineering program.
That. Okay, you started in engineering.
Yeah, and I got my butt kicked, quite frankly. I went in there and partly wanted to, explore math and science, which I was really good at in high school, but I also kind of wanted to have fun. And University of Buffalo is a huge research university.
Right.
For our listeners who might not know. I mean, I think it's over 10,000 undergrads matriculate into University of Buffalo. So, research institution, very, very prominent with international students, and quite frankly, the level of math and science, abilities coming out of places like India and China and South Asia really kind of blew me out of the water. I mean, I was very much outside of my element a little bit, and noticed I was not where they were, so I struggled a little bit and ended up transitioning. But I think that's probably a part of it. I mean, American engineers, it seems like over the last 10 years, maybe more, we've been importing a lot more of our engineers than we actually have been developing them. So that might be a problem in the longer term.
Yeah. In fact, our two most recent hires are H-1B candidates.
So those are visas for our listeners who may not be familiar with that.
I was going to ask you if you do any immigration law, because I think their student visas are going to be expiring soon, so I'm going to have to.
Dave Gervais, I'll give you a call.
Yeah.
I know a good immigration attorney, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
But you're able to work through that challenge, and you're bringing on new engineers, and the firm is expanding. Let's slow down a little bit, and in layman's terms, tell our listeners a little bit more about what AES Northeast does, and what exactly, kind of projects you work with in the realm of architecture, engineering, land surveying. I mean, there's a whole lot of different things you do. I even came across GIS, which I'm not familiar with, Geographic Information Systems, grant writing. I mean, you guys do a ton of things. So if you can just distill it down for our listeners.
Yeah. Well, one of the great things about our firm is that we do offer diverse services, and all under one roof. Okay, we have the architecture,
one-stop shop,
and surveying under one roof. So that's worked very well for us, because if one department is not that busy, the other department will be busy and pick it up. So that's worked well for us over the years. But the bulk of our work now and for the last several years has been in municipal water and wastewater. There's a lot of antiquated municipal water systems and wastewater systems up and down the Champlain Valley. There is public funding available for those projects that comes down through the federal government Environmental Protection Fund goes to help the state agencies. Environmental Facilities Corporation, the arm of DEC, invest a lot of money in local infrastructure. So that's been successful for us to design replacement projects, new projects, extensions, and so forth.
I'm really fascinated by this, quite honestly, for a lot of different reasons. I'm interested to know then, when were a lot of these systems put into place? Because I know in the 50s, Eisenhower, and 60s, we obviously had a lot of infrastructure, federal infrastructure built. As far as municipal infrastructure, did a lot of these systems come into play at about the same time, or are they kind of a little bit of a scattershot?
It's scattered. There are many systems that we work on that originated back in the 1930s, and in that era. Some post-World War II systems were developed too. Even prior to World War II, some of the towns and villages down in Essex County, Mineville, areas like that, were relied on heavily to help with the war efforts back at that time. So there were, the mining towns and so forth were served with public water systems, or community water systems, community sewer systems, and the local governments down there have had to inherit those old systems. So it's always a challenge for a small town to have one of these systems. you know, once it's there, you can't very well, you know, get rid of it. And also, you know, it's a
Paying for it too. I mean, huge.
it has to be paid for.
Bonding. I'm sure that's a
Yeah.
fairly complicated.
But they're also public water, public sewer is you know, an integral part of economic development too. So if these small towns want to develop their their tax base and so forth, then you know, they're interested in expanding these water districts and sewer districts. So,
Both to bring in businesses and residential
that's
facilities.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, water delivery is not something historically I think that's very sexy or that kind of,
No,
you know,
no,
a lot of
it's
people
not,
pay
yeah.
attention to. But certainly, I think within the last 5 years, it's kind of become much more prominent. Specifically with Flint, Michigan, I think is the most prominent
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Even here in New York, though, I've seen, I think it's Hoosick Falls and Ilion. There have been some issues with water delivery. So. It sounds like our listeners are probably interested to know that you guys are doing this work and have been very successful in avoiding these types of issues. I mean, it looks like the amount of work that you're doing in the area is kind of mind-blowing to me. Secured funding to help Ticonderoga, Saranac Lake, San Armand, Chateauguay with planning. Sounds like a lot of the areas up and down the Champlain Valley, even in Vermont, you've done a couple projects over there. So. You know, what do you think is so important about water delivery, and why should our listeners care?
Well, clean water is, you know, absolutely essential. And also many of these communities are connected to, you know, they're very near rivers and, of course, Lake Champlain. So keeping surface water clean and keeping the groundwater clean is, you know, I think personally is a very noble cause, and I think you know, our younger engineers are very happy to be involved with that, and I hope you know, everybody in the communities that we work for is happy as well too.
Yeah, so you can tell Scott takes a lot of pride in this, which I think obviously we all should take pride in our work. You guys have had a lot of successful programs and projects, so let's talk a little bit about that. So Park, you were involved with that project.
Yeah, Park. That was, you know, after the base closure. I got called upon by Park to do some surveying for them to cut out some parcels, and then after we got to know one another, we were successful with submitting a proposal to subdivide the entire former Plattsburgh Air Force Base, some 90 or so lots, and you know, that was a tremendous work effort. The air base was situated in both the city of Plattsburgh and the town of Plattsburgh, and the subdivision of those parcels had to comply with local zoning and subdivision codes, and so that was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun work too.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note here later. The role of logistics. I mean, logistics seems to be a huge part in what you're doing, and just alluding to 90 different parcels. And I think our listeners know how big, you know, the old and new Air Force Base was. So, I mean, how many years and you know, did it take to kind of work through that project?
Yeah, probably start to finish, I'm gonna say like 2001 to 2004, if memory serves.
Okay.
I think around, you know, a 3 or 4 year time frame to get all of that approved. I remember, let's see, we were initially, I think my involvement was with the Select Property Group, Lake Country Village,
Okay, yep.
converting some of that housing into what it is today. In terms of ownership, those were newly renovated units on that the Air Force had done. The Select Property Group snagged them up and marketed them, and you know, subdivided them into individually owned condominium units. So that was a lot of work, and then we went on to subdivide what we call the old base, the U.S. Oval area, and in there.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember being at a City of Plattsburgh zoning board meeting until almost 2:00 one morning. Going
That
through
must have been fun.
The huge
All the memories.
laundry list of all of the zoning variances that were needed in order to create that subdivision.
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking here about moving the region forward. I mean, very clearly, you're helping to do that. You're taking kind of a messy situation and working out the logistics and organizing things in a way that would allow people and the region to move forward and be able to develop. So I think that's why we're so glad to have you on here. And more recently, another bit of innovation that you guys are very involved with that piques my interest is the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing at Clinton Community College.
Yes,
So,
yeah, that was a major project, Boris, and that was run and designed and managed by our building systems department. That's our mechanical engineer, Nathan Boll, one of my partners, and David Whitford, our registered architect. Between the two of them, they've both had a lot of experience with building projects, school additions, renovations, and so forth. And when we were able to sit down with Clinton Community College and come up with the program to design the Institute of Advanced Manufacturing, we thought that was a great project, and it was one that we absolutely were not going to fail at, and devoted a lot of resources to it. And I'm happy to say it came out a very successful project and real showcase project for us, and for the college and for the region as a whole, I hope.
yeah, absolutely. I'm a little disappointed that I haven't been inside the building, but from the exterior, it's absolutely gorgeous, state of the art. So, I mean, I love what you're doing. I'm hearing great things about the transition and Dr. DePasquale, and I think a lot of the things that are going on there. Excuse me, I had Sheriff Favreau on, and he's on the board. Sheriff David Favreau's on the board of Clinton Community Colleges. So
certainly.
very optimistic. I love what's happening with community colleges, and I think investing in those local educational institutions that end up spurring and the innovation of the next generation. I think we're going to see a lot coming out of that. So very, very exciting stuff. Let's talk about your clients then. It sounds like you have a pretty wide array of clients, both from municipal, commercial, perhaps even residential facilities.
Yes, and as I said before, the bulk of our work recently has been municipal clients up and down the Champlain Valley, but we don't want to restrict ourselves just to any one market. I think that's something that all of my partners and I have been cognizant of over the years, that we want to be able to have a company that is tooled to handle a variety of clients, from small residential property owners up to colleges and municipalities and that type of thing. So, yeah, we want to be available for everybody here in the North Country. So,
yeah, great. So if there are any listeners out there who are interested in your work, what's the best place? A website? Give you a call?
Website is fine. Our email addresses are on there. Our phones are always answered. Usually, I don't know how many lines we have now, but there's usually a line available. I work a lot with email. I mean, goodness, when I think back when I started this and how we used to, rely on written letters for communication, and compare that to the pace of business now, when you can you send off an email. Back before it'd take several days before you get
snail mail,
correspondence completed, and now it's instantaneous. So,
well, just think about the writing too. I mean, most people can type at about 40 to 50 words a minute, and I think handwritten is somewhere around 6 to 8. So it's kind of amazing how quickly the world is changing, and how even communications and these projects probably can maybe able to be worked out a little bit quicker, and hopefully that's happened over time.
Yeah, we can take on more projects at any given time with the technology that we have. And as I mentioned that, it makes me kind of think back to the early days, after I got out of college, and the kind of equipment we used then compared to the kind of equipment we use now. And surveying is one good example of that. The surveying equipment that we started with was very much more manual than the type of equipment we use now. Angles were turned, and readings were made on the instrument, and then transferred into handwritten field notes, and then taken back to the office and reduced into map format.
I think we've all seen that historically, people with the surveying, taking the notes, but now it's probably a little bit more digitized.
Oh my goodness, it is. we have now two what are called robotic total stations. That's where the surveyor can walk around a site with a pole and a data collector attached to that pole that is radio linked back to a robotic instrument that turns the angles, records the distances, all automatically. And so, you know.
And accurately, I would hope.
Oh, very highly accurately.
Good.
When I first started out, it was not uncommon to have a 3-person crew out in the field collecting information to make maps from. That can now be done with one person and a robotic total station. So robotics is been transformational for land surveying, as well as GPS equipment, the global positioning system equipment that we use today. Survey grade accuracy, not the kind of GPS you get on your telephone or your car, where that puts you within, and that's pretty good now. I mean, you can get within several
1,500.
meters.
Oh, is it that precise?
You can your cell phone. You can get your location down within several meters.
Okay.
But when we talk about survey grade GPS accuracy, we're talking about 1 centimeter.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, yeah.
So hopefully then less mistakes, right? I could imagine historically you'd run into some issues here or there with measurements, but hopefully it's more streamlined now.
It is, yeah. There's less chance for mistakes, but at the same time, it still requires an understanding of how accurate the information you're collecting is. Like I just alluded to a little bit, the difference between going out with a handheld GPS collector versus, survey grade equipment. And even with the survey grade equipment, there are things that affect that. The number of satellites in the air at any given point in time can affect the accuracy. So.
Is it triangulation, or is it even more complex than that? Because when you're mentioning these satellites, I'm almost thinking there's maybe even a dozen that it's almost more triangulation.
It is basically, and the more satellites that your GPS receiver is exposed to, generally speaking, the
more accurate.
The more accuracy you're going to have.
Cool.
And if you know that the constellation is such that you don't have as many satellites available, then maybe you want to do some static sessions as opposed to the real-time data collection. So there's still
a little bit of art to the science.
Yeah, that's true. It is. And also, the other thing too, I should mention, and this relates to a project we're working on at Clinton Community College currently, and that's the replacement of the exterior facade of the college. That work is in design right now, and that'll be a contract that will be let. But to collect the data for the entire facade of Clinton Community College, we looked for old original architectural drawings of the site, because
blueprints, all that stuff.
Yeah, we looked for that, and there's not much information available actually on that facade, and we needed a highly detailed model of the exterior faces of the college. We need to know where all the windows are, where all the cornices and all those kinds of architectural
vents or other things
on that building are, so that we can present a set of plans to a contractor and that their estimates can be highly accurate and so forth. So that was a challenge to us. How are we going to collect all of this data? Are we going to send out all our people with measuring tapes and
just get a drone to do it, right?
Well, that is one thing we consider as drone, but what we actually ended up using is terrestrial or land-based LiDAR collection. So
you might have to explain that one to me.
Yeah.
I know what radar is. So is it something similar?
This is LiDAR, yeah.
Lasers?
Basically, it is. Yeah. So
Sweet.
It's a scanner. So there's two types of LiDAR collection. One is terrestrial, where you set it up on a tripod on the ground, and the other is airplane-based or drone-based LiDAR camera that you select. But we're doing the sides of the building, so the drone wasn't quite the solution, or quite as good a solution as the actual tripod base. So we set up the tripod in several locations around the building, and push the button, and it actually scans the building. It collects literally millions of points of information.
Yeah.
On that, the surface, the facade of the building, and then that's how we produced the model of the existing building in just a matter of days. When compared to collecting all of that information manually, with tapes and ladders and that kind of thing, it would have taken weeks. So
yeah, you're making me wish I had
cool.
stuck with the engineering instead of going into law. But no, I mean, just some amazing, really, really cool things. And just in reviewing your website, it looks like you're also using the latest versions of AutoCAD. I'm not familiar with Revit software, but certainly you're always implementing new technology and trying
absolutely, yeah. That's one thing I take a lot of pride in, because even going back to when Wayne Ryan and I started, we made a conscious decision then that we were going to, always try and stay cutting edge when it came to technology. Yeah, I remember our first AutoCAD license in the machine that we had to run it on, because our Tandy 6 or Radio Shack Tandy machines and our Commodore 64s would not run AutoCAD. So I remember the first IBM desktop computer that I got. That's when we were on Clinton Street. I remember when I turned it on, I didn't imagine that the lights were going dim and throughout the whole city when I turned that on.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always enjoyed AutoCAD. I mean, I got to do it in high school, and then obviously a little bit.
Sure.
Unfortunately, my end to my engineering career came with programming and Java, C++. That was kind of where I was like,
Right.
all right, it's a little much for me. But yeah, I'm really just fascinated by all the stuff that you're doing. I've always obviously had some interest in engineering, which is why I started my studies there. So sounds like you guys are doing a lot of things to help keep up with the innovation side of it. On the other side of that, though, I'm interested to know about sustainability practices, because we're obviously here. You went to school in the Adirondacks. I think this area has a lot of beautiful areas we want to seek to keep, somewhat pristine and protect them from degradation, things of that nature. How much do you try and incorporate sustainability practices into the firm?
For example, most of our new water treatment plants that we do in the municipalities have a solar energy component to them. That works good for the town that it's in. It helps reduce their utility bill, and also the funding agencies that we're involved with really like to see those amenities provided on new municipal infrastructure projects. So, yeah, solar is a great one. Great example of how we get involved with sustainability, and also, the selection of materials. It's a fine line. You got to balance cost to the community, but at the same time, you got to look at the long-term maintenance burden that's on these communities too. So we want to provide them with a product that is going to last a long time in terms of their asset management programs. But at the same time, it's got to be affordable to the community members as well. So we're always fighting that battle. We'd like to build buildings that would last for the next 100 years. But
it would cost probably maybe 200%
Yeah.
or a lot more. Oh, that's fascinating because one of the things in the year and a half that I was actually an engineering major, one of the cool things I learned is that everything is designed to fail in engineering, which I didn't even really think about, and I kind of question whether or not that's 100% true. But I appreciate the kind of forward-looking nature of that you kind of always hope that things last as long as possible, but at the same time you most likely do have to incorporate that end game, right? And how do you help do that? I mean, you don't want it to fail in a way that's going to be tragic, or how does that whole aspect play out?
Well, that really gets involved with what I just mentioned, an asset management program, which each municipality that has any of these community systems, water systems, sewer systems, they should be considering an asset management program so they can understand what the life expectancy is of the improvements that they've put in place, so that they can understand how they need to budget over time to eventually replace, that infrastructure. Because at some point in time, it will need to be replaced. And if they plan it over the life expectancy of the project, then they'll be in much better shape to replace it when the time comes, rather than have to do like many towns are doing with systems that are 70, 80, close to 100 years old. Well, now we've got to replace it. How are we going to afford it? And the user costs go from $100 a year to $1,000 a year. So
Wow.
So it's all about asset management and planning. And I got to tell you, I have a lot of respect for local town and village town supervisors, village mayors. A lot of respect for the people that are doing those jobs, because it's a tremendous amount of work, and
Often very thankless work too. I think we
very
should
thankless
mention.
work. And ask any new town supervisor, that's been in office after their first term, and they're midway through their first term. I think they're saying, "My goodness, what am I getting involved with?" Especially if they haven't spent a lot of time on the town board prior to becoming a supervisor. It's really a tremendous amount of work.
I work with the Troy City Council. I just wanted to interject that. And even that, I mean, I was kind of blown away at how, just complicated this stuff is. So I mentioned earlier bonding. How do you pay for this stuff? I mean, it really is, and I think to your point, I have noticed this nationally. I think our listeners probably know that I'm a little bit disappointed, to put it mildly, at the state of our politics. But I think locally, we do have a tremendous amount of local leaders, and I would echo your statements as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, hats off to those. They're getting paid, but certainly not paid what
Private industry.
Yeah,
right.
not pay comparable to the work they're putting in. Some of these town supervisors, what they're making compared to the effort it takes for them to do a good job, it's not in line.
Because I would imagine a lot of it's more than 40 hours a week. I mean, you're always fielding calls, this thing's breaking, water main, et cetera. So I did want to move on to another sustainability topic, which I haven't heard much about recently, but when I was in law school, I took a law of climate change, and one of the things that we talked about was leadership in energy and environmental design. I think there's different, like a silver, gold, platinum. There's different certification standards, and I think platinum is, essentially like almost carbon neutral, or they're very, very advanced.
Right.
Have you had an opportunity to work on any of these programs?
It's something that has always been in the back of our minds. We've looked at the requirements to become certified in LEED, and
It's pretty onerous, from what I can tell.
it is, and the benefit of doing it is right now, anyway, it's not to the level where we want to concentrate our efforts right now. Getting projects LEED certified is not that easy. It's expensive to have it done, to do it right. And the cost benefit is not that huge right now. So it's kind of been on the back burner for us. There hasn't been the demand for it right now to warrant our getting back into getting our certification in that area.
Okay. So what's next? We'll put that under what's next. Maybe in the medium to long term, that'll be something that we might be able to see. Very, very cool. So just to finish out here a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the educational and community work that you're doing. I noticed on your website that you have a AES job shadow program. They highlighted Andy Mazzella. I could almost guess he's probably related to Chris Mazzella, the principal there. Very, very neat. He's interested in architecture, I believe, and you gave him an opportunity to explore that. I think I saw some VR, virtual reality headset. So talk a little bit about that and how you're looking to incorporate the community and push the education and I guess the awareness about STEM fields in the community.
Yeah, that's something that we've been involved with for as long as I can remember. I think I remember attending career days back in the 1980s and 1990s, and that's something that we've encouraged all of our staff to lend themselves to. There's several local high school programs are aware that AES is a resource for the job shadowing.
Great.
And we really welcome having students come in. Had many of them and really enjoy having them there, and are happy to work with the local schools in that regard, because we need students. Getting back a little bit, if you don't mind, Matt,
let's do it.
to getting young engineers, architects, surveyors, finding them.
Yeah.
The ones that are from this area that have graduated from Clarkson and other colleges.
RIT, RPI.
Yeah, they tend to get snagged up by the larger firms and the city areas, Albany,
Boston,
Syracuse,
New York City,
Boston, New York.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And once they get a taste of that living, it's hard to get them to come back here sometimes. So, we're competing against those other markets for staffing all the time. So we're coming to realize is that in order to satisfy our staffing needs, we really got to get in touch with these kids in high school, help them out, give them summer internships while they're going to college. In fact, we have one great success story with regard to that at Clarkson. The person that's going to be graduating this spring has decided to come on board with us, but she has been a student intern, I think, since her sophomore or possibly freshman year. So she's been interning with us through the summers. She's from the area and knows what AES is about, and is going to come to work for us this spring full time. So
That's really exciting. I mean, one of the things I think, in having all of the New York 21 congressional candidates on the Democratic side, that was, I think, maybe one of the most consistent themes I heard was being able to keep our young talent here.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing is that the area is transitioning, and I think I came back to the area. A lot of people, I think, are coming back because a number of reasons. One is I think there's more here, right? I mean,
there is. There's more here. Really, it really irritates me when I hear some people come up here and say, well, there's nothing in Plattsburgh. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are things in this area, not just the Plattsburgh area, but if you look at the region here, Burlington, Plattsburgh, Lake Placid, Montreal, there's a lot of things to do here if you take the time to look into it. And so I say it's a great place to live.
And still, even, I mean, a 5-hour, 6-hour train, maybe the train's, 8 hours, but from New York City, I mean, I do think that we have a lot going on here, and I think transportation we'll see hopefully in the next, several years becomes a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient, and I think we are uniquely positioned in a place with a lot of culture and also recreation. I mean, so yeah, let's conclude it here with one of the things I like to do with my guests is to find out, a couple things. One is, where do you think we can do better, and where are some shortcomings in the North Country? I think we've kind of alluded to that already with maybe maintaining the talent here. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going well. I mean, I alluded to more here. It's, again, this is something our listeners probably know. Craft beer is something that I've kind of liked. Vermont has just been recently named the king of craft beer, which is 100% deserved and earned. And we're seeing a wellspring of different craft breweries coming up. Sable, obviously, foremost among them. We've had Dan Badger on. I think we're going to have Township 7 on soon. So, as far as entertainment and things to do, I think that those things are kind of filling in, and we're seeing more of that.
Yeah.
And we've historically already had the skiing, the hiking. So I'm with you. I kind of get a little bit irked when I hear people complain that there's just not much to do here.
Yeah, they're not looking for things to do because there are many things to do. And the Chamber of Commerce, Adirondack Coast people are working hard to try to get the word out. You guys here at North Volume with your podcasts, I think are doing a great job. There's some really great shows here. I think there's a lot of young people here that are very interested in supporting the community, and I think things are really looking up here in the community. I think you're going to see in the next 10 to 20 years, or maybe less, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully less, but
that you're going to see Plattsburgh as a real destination. People are really going to be interested in coming up here, and as long as we can continue to provide the jobs for those people here, I think Plattsburgh is going to be a great area.
Very well said. And obviously, you are doing a lot of things in that area. I mean, specifically, just expanding from 2 to over 40 people in the last 30 years. Obviously, you're a huge resource for young people that are looking to get into the STEM fields, architecture, just fascinating stuff. So thank you so much for joining us,
Sure.
Scott. I guess just before we wrap up here again, just to highlight a little bit more of the community and things that are being developed, and I guess alluding to the town supervisors, the LaPierre Lane Riverway was just recently opened. You guys worked on that project, a small project, but a beautiful little area there in Morrisonville. You can take your kids. There's some place to I think there's a swing, there's a slide, just a very, very cool thing. And it's not always going to be the big, sexy, thing that every city has, but over time, we're bringing in these small little things that are making it easier. And I think providing more activities for the community. So I'm very optimistic, and thank you so much for joining us. So that's Scott Allen of AES Northeast. Obviously, check out his website, which is www.aesnortheast.com. Lots of information there as well. Again, 1012 City Hall Place. Check out their all the services they provide to the community. So just in wrapping up here, we want to thank, of course, Scott for joining us. Our listeners, thank you for continued support. North Volume Media, appreciate everything you're doing. Please, if I can just ask from our listeners, though, please subscribe, share, like, even review the podcast if you get a chance. I'd appreciate all of that. In order for us to move the region forward, to keep the conversation going, we have to have a majority or a lot of the community engaged, and that's why we're asking everyone to come in, get involved through comments, shares, likes, and just obviously give us suggestions as well. Also, businesses, if you're looking to sponsor Waite Innovate, give Neil Battinelli a shout out, Neil at North Volume, NEIL, northvolume.com. So thanks again for listening. We're looking forward to having everyone back for episode 48 of Waite Innovate, only on North Volume.